My story begins at 32, living in my grandmother's charming colonial house in a peaceful suburban neighborhood. She left it to me when she passed away 8 years ago, my father's mother, a woman whose unconditional love shaped who I am today. The house wasn't fancy or modern, but it had character and history, with solid oak floors that creaked just enough to remind you of its age and windows that caught the morning light in ways that made even rainy days feel bright. I'm Avery, and until recently, my life seemed to be on a steady upward trajectory. After working as a nurse for 7 years, I'd made the leap into real estate investing and found unexpected success. I owned my grandmother's house outright, and I thought I had what anyone would call a supportive family: my mother Diane, my stepfather Warren, and my younger half-sister Megan, who at 28 still hadn't found a real job despite her expensive private university degree that our parents had fully funded. They lived in a sleek contemporary house closer to downtown, though they were still struggling with a substantial mortgage that seemed to stretch endlessly into their future. The contrast between our situations wasn't something we discussed openly, but I often felt the weight of unspoken expectations whenever family gatherings rolled around. "Avery, sweetie, do you have a minute?" my mother asked one Sunday afternoon during our monthly brunch at my place. Her voice had that syrupy quality it always took on when she wanted something. "Warren and I have been thinking. This beautiful house of yours, it's exactly what we've always dreamed of owning. The peaceful location, the gorgeous garden space." I nodded cautiously, a familiar tension creeping up my spine. My mother's eyes darted around the living room, taking in the original crown molding and built-in bookshelves like she was mentally measuring for curtains. "And I know your investment properties take you all over the city," she continued, stirring her coffee with calculated precision. "Our house is so much more centrally located for your business." That's when she unveiled her master plan, her brilliant idea to swap houses. They would move into my grandmother's treasured home, and I would take their place in the city house. I just needed to keep paying their mortgage, of course. "Think about it," she said, her eyes gleaming with barely contained excitement. "You'd be so much closer to all your properties, and the house is bigger, more modern. Plus, Warren and I have always wanted to retire in a charming place like this." I considered it carefully. Her points weren't entirely wrong. Their house was newer, with an updated kitchen and more square footage, and the location would put me closer to most of my investment properties. "What about the legal aspects?" I asked, already feeling myself being pulled into her orbit. "Shouldn't we draw up proper paperwork for a transaction this significant?" Mom laughed and waved her hand dismissively, as if I'd suggested we need a contract to borrow sugar. "Oh sweetie, we're family. Why waste money on lawyers? You know I'd never do anything to hurt you." The swap happened with surprising speed after that. I settled into my new place, trying to ignore the nagging voice in my head that questioned the arrangement. Every month, I faithfully sent Mom the mortgage payment, usually exceeding the required amount because I wanted to help pay it off faster. I invested heavily in improving the house too, replacing outdated appliances and completely renovating several rooms to match my taste. For 4 years, that was our arrangement. I paid the mortgage without fail, often contributing extra whenever I could. Everything seemed perfect. I had a more convenient location for my growing business, a modern home, and what I believed was a solid understanding with my family. The International Real Estate Conference in London was exhausting but worth it: 2 weeks of networking, property tours, and investment seminars. Despite the valuable connections I'd made, I was beyond ready to collapse in my own bed after the long flight home. The last thing I expected was to find myself standing homeless on my own doorstep. It was a crisp autumn evening when my rideshare dropped me off. I dragged my suitcase up the driveway, immediately noticing something off. Lights blazed from every window, and I could hear raucous laughter inside. Strange, considering I lived alone and had definitely turned everything off before my trip. My stomach knotted as I tried my key in the lock. It didn't work. I tried again, then a third time, my confusion rapidly morphing into panic as the terrible realization dawned: someone had changed the locks. Just as I was about to call a locksmith, the door swung open. There stood Megan, my 28-year-old sister, wearing my designer bathrobe and looking at me with the entitled expression I'd grown to dread since childhood. Behind her, her unemployed husband Jason lounged on my expensive sectional, dirty shoes propped on my custom coffee table, beer bottle leaving rings on the wood. Oh, you're back already, Megan said, leaning against the doorframe with a smirk that made my blood pressure skyrocket. Your stuff's in garbage bags on the side of the house. I stood frozen, suitcase still in hand, jet lag and shock creating a surreal fog around me. My things? What are you talking about? This is my house. Not anymore. She examined her perfectly manicured nails, the same ones our parents still paid for monthly at that exclusive salon downtown. Mom and Dad gave it to us as our housewarming gift. We're living here now. The ground seemed to shift beneath my feet. Have you completely lost your mind? I've been paying the mortgage on this house for 4 years. Yeah, about that. Megan rolled her eyes dramatically, looking exactly like our mother when she was dismissing someone's valid concerns. That's not really my problem. Mom said I need this house more than you do. You have your precious career and investments, while Jason and I are just starting out. My vision actually blurred with rage. Starting out? You're nearly 30. Whatever, she flipped her hair, the same gesture she'd used since middle school when losing an argument. The point is, Mom and Dad gave us the house, so. She made a shooing motion with her hand like I was an unwelcome stray cat. You need to leave. Get off our property before we call the police. Standing there on what was still legally my own porch, suddenly without a home, memories crashed over me like a tidal wave, all the times Megan had received preferential treatment, her brand new Range Rover while I drove a used Honda through nursing school, designer clothes while I wore scrubs, her lavish destination wedding while I couldn't even get our parents to attend my nursing school graduation. I trembled with a fury so intense I could barely speak as my little sister prepared to slam the door in my face. Where exactly am I supposed to go? She shrugged with callous indifference that stole my breath. Not my concern. Get a hotel or something with all your investment money. Just don't come back here, this is our home now. The door slammed shut in my face. Through the window, I could see them laughing, my sister and her freeloading husband making themselves comfortable in the house I'd spent 4 years paying for, upgrading, and turning into my sanctuary. I don't remember walking back to my car. I don't remember the drive to my parents' house, my grandmother's house, the one I'd relinquished in our swap. My mind was consumed by the pattern that had been there my entire life, the blatant favoritism, the preferential treatment, the way Megan always received everything she desired while I was expected to simply accept it with a smile. But this betrayal cut deeper than anything before. This wasn't just another designer handbag or luxury vacation funded by our parents. This was my home, my sanctuary, everything I'd invested in and built for myself. I pulled into the familiar driveway of my grandmother's house, my body vibrating with a righteous fury I'd never allowed myself to feel before. The porch light illuminated the garden beds I'd lovingly tended for years before our exchange. My knuckles were already white with tension when I reached the door, and I pounded on it with enough force to send pain shooting through my hand. Mom! Open this door right now. We need to talk about what you and Megan have done. I heard hushed movement inside, urgent whispers, footsteps approaching the door, but it remained firmly closed. Avery, my mother's voice filtered through, muffled but unmistakable in its coldness. Go away. The words hit me like a physical blow. What? Mom, open the door. Megan just locked me out of my house, the house I've been faithfully paying the mortgage on for 4 years. That house doesn't belong to you anymore, Warren's gruff voice joined in. And neither does this one. This is our home now. The ground seemed to lurch beneath my feet as their betrayal fully registered. Are you serious right now? This is my house. Grandma left it to me. I have the deed to prove it. You need to leave immediately. Mom's voice had that patronizing tone she used when she thought she was being perfectly reasonable while saying something outrageous. Go find an apartment with all your investment income. Stop disrupting everyone's lives and making us uncomfortable. I pressed my palms flat against the door, partly to steady myself and partly to resist the urge to break it down. Making you uncomfortable? Are you kidding me? You've conspired to make me homeless. Megan's living in the house I've been paying for, and now you won't even face me to discuss what you've done? We've put considerable money into this property, Mom snapped defensively. We've done extensive renovations, significant improvements. And what about the thousands I poured into your house? My voice rose to a shout that echoed through the quiet neighborhood. The state-of-the-art kitchen appliances, The completely remodeled master bathroom. The 4 years of mortgage payments that you clearly never intended to honor. That's entirely different, she replied with chilling dismissal. Different how? Explain to me how it's different, Mom. The pieces suddenly aligned with crystal clarity. You planned this from the beginning, didn't you? Get me to pay your mortgage while you lived in my inheritance, then give my house to your precious Megan and keep Grandma's property for yourselves. What a brilliant scheme, leave me with nothing while you divide up my property like vultures. There was a weighted silence, then Mom's voice returned, icy and unyielding. You need to leave immediately, Avery. This is our house now, and you're not welcome here. Something fundamental broke inside me. 4 years of faithfully making their payments, thousands spent on home improvements, and a lifetime of watching Megan receive preferential treatment, it all coalesced into a single, clarifying moment of resolve. Actually, Mom, you're wrong about something critical, I said, my voice suddenly steady and controlled. This is legally my house. The deed remains in my name. Grandma left it to me, remember? And since you're so comfortable throwing people out of their homes, perhaps it's time I return the favor. You wouldn't dare, Warren's voice rumbled threateningly from behind the door. Try me, I replied with newfound conviction. I'm finished being the family doormat. I'm done watching you favor Megan while exploiting my generosity. Get out of my house within 3 days, or I'll have you legally evicted. I promise you that. Stunned silence followed my ultimatum. I waited 1 beat longer, then turned and walked away with my head held high. I had nowhere to sleep tonight, but I knew exactly what I needed to do tomorrow. 2 hours later, I checked into a modest extended stay hotel, my luggage still packed from the international conference. The shock was wearing off, replaced by a cold, focused determination I'd never felt before. I pulled out my phone and started searching for the best real estate attorney in the city. The lawyer I hired, Caroline Baker, was a formidable woman with 20 years of experience in property law. Within 48 hours, she had prepared all the necessary eviction documents. I stood slightly behind her on the familiar porch of my grandmother's house, watching as she knocked on the door with 3 precise, authoritative raps. Diane opened it this time, her practiced composure crumbling when she saw the official legal documents in Caroline's manicured hand. Good morning, Mrs. Hamilton, Caroline said, her voice crisp and unyielding. I'm here representing your daughter Avery, the legal owner of this property. I'm serving you with an official eviction notice. This is outrageous. Warren appeared behind my mother, his face flushing deep crimson with indignation. Caroline remained perfectly calm, straightening her designer suit jacket. Actually, it's entirely lawful, and we're proceeding as required by statute. You have exactly 72 hours to vacate these premises. Should you fail to comply, we'll immediately involve law enforcement and pursue additional legal action for forcible detainer. I stood silently, observing my mother's face transition from shock to rage to the dawning fear that her scheme had catastrophically backfired. She attempted to catch my eye, switching tactics with practiced ease, but I deliberately looked past her. I was immune to her manipulation now. Avery, darling, she attempted, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness, surely we can discuss this like adults. The time for discussion was before you gave away my house to Megan without my knowledge or consent, I cut her off firmly. 3 days, Mother. Not 1 hour more. Those 72 hours stretched endlessly. I remained in my hotel, flinching whenever my phone buzzed, but surprisingly, they actually complied with the order. Early on the 4th morning, Caroline called to inform me that my parents had completely vacated the property. When I arrived, they were loading their final possessions into a rented moving truck. Diane stood in the driveway, watching my approach with red-rimmed eyes that held no genuine remorse, only self-pity. You're no daughter of mine, she spat venomously, tears streaming dramatically down her face. You're a heartless traitor. After everything we've sacrificed for you. Sacrificed for me? I laughed with genuine incredulity. You mean using me as your personal bank for 4 years while plotting to steal my property? Yes, thank you so much for that valuable life lesson. She slid into their luxury SUV without another word, and I watched them drive away to whatever rental they'd grudgingly arranged. Behind them, the moving truck followed, and suddenly the driveway stood empty. My grandmother's beloved home was mine again. Inside, I found calculated disarray, drawers pulled out, items scattered across floors, but nothing permanently damaged. As I stood in my grandmother's sunlit living room, a realization crystallized with perfect clarity. I was immediately stopping payment on their mortgage. They'd shattered our agreement the moment they locked me out of the house I'd been faithfully paying for. Now they could face the consequences of their actions. I settled into my grandmother's cherished rocking chair, feeling her wisdom surrounding me, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I allowed myself to smile. I couldn't stop calculating the small fortune I'd invested in my parents' property, top-of-the-line kitchen appliances, that premium water heating system, the complete master bathroom renovation. I treated that house as if it were truly mine, believing their empty promises that someday it would be. The most painful realization was about the mortgage itself. 4 years of consistent payments, always sending significantly more than required, believing I was making a smart investment in my future. According to my calculations, approximately $50,000 remained on the loan. Just 2 more years at my accelerated payment schedule, and the property would have been fully paid off. I'd been agonizingly close to owning it outright. All that money, I whispered, the words hanging in the empty room. All those extra payments. A memory suddenly surfaced, something I dismissed at the time but now recognized as the first red flag. It happened shortly after we'd completed the house swap. Diane had been sitting at her new kitchen table, my grandmother's antique oak table, stirring her coffee with that practiced innocent expression she always wore when angling for something. "Avery, sweetie," she'd said with calculated casualness, "I've been thinking. Since we're settling in here now, perhaps you should simply transfer the house deed to us. You know, make everything official. We'll sign our house over to you once you've paid off the mortgage, naturally." I remembered how reasonable she'd tried to make it sound, as if it were merely administrative housekeeping, but my business instincts had suggested an alternative. "Why don't we approach it from the opposite direction?" I countered. "You could transfer the mortgage to my name immediately, and I'll continue making the payments officially. Then I'll sign over grandmother's house to you right away." The way Diane's expression had shifted, just for a millisecond before she masked it with a practiced smile, I should have recognized the warning sign. "Oh no," she backpedaled quickly. "That would create unnecessary complications with the bank. Better to simply wait until the mortgage is completely satisfied, then we can execute a clean exchange of both properties." Warren had jumped in then, nodding emphatically. "Much more straightforward that way, Avery. No reason to involve financial institutions or attorneys. We're family, after all." Sitting now in my grandmother's treasured rocking chair, I finally perceived their scheme with perfect clarity. They had never intended to transfer that house to me. They had wanted both, their house and mine. If I had signed over my grandmother's property as they'd repeatedly pressed me to do, an icy chill crawled down my spine. I would be completely homeless at this moment, with no fallback position, no legal claim to either property, literally out on the street while my family enjoyed possession of both houses. At least I'd maintained the legal ownership of this house. It provided little consolation when I contemplated all the money I'd essentially gifted them, but it was significantly better than nothing: a secure roof over my head, a property they couldn't seize from me, and, most critically, a profound lesson about trust, particularly when it came to family. Perhaps especially when it came to family. My phone lit up exactly 3 days after I stopped paying the mortgage. I was sitting in my grandmother's sunny kitchen, sipping coffee and contemplating how to rebuild my life, when Diane's name flashed across my screen. I almost declined the call, but part of me craved this confrontation, needed the closure. "Where's the mortgage payment?" No greeting, just immediate demands. Her voice was sharp, entitled, as if I were some delinquent tenant rather than her daughter. "The bank is charging us late fees." I couldn't suppress a bitter laugh. "Are you seriously texting me about money right now?" "Of course I am. You have to pay the mortgage." "Let me understand this correctly," I replied, gripping my mug so tightly my knuckles blanched. "You lock me out of the house I've been paying for, give it to Megan and her unemployed husband, and still expect me to make the payments. Have you lost your mind?" "That house belongs to Megan," I interrupted firmly. "Then let Megan pay for it. She lives there now, doesn't she? Enjoying her perfect life with Jason in the house I renovated. The house I've been faithfully paying for." Diane's voice turned shrill, hitting that particular pitch that always signaled she wasn't getting her way. Megan can't possibly pay the mortgage. She just finished her degree program and hasn't found the right position yet. They just had that beautiful destination wedding, and they're still settling in. Not my problem, I stated with newfound calm. Not anymore. You gave her my house. Fine. She gets the mortgage payments too. A pause followed, then Diane's voice turned threatening, using that same manipulative tone she'd wielded since my childhood. Fine then. We'll just move back into my house. I actually laughed out loud, and it felt surprisingly liberating. Absolutely not. Try it, and I'll have you arrested for trespassing. I've already evicted you once, care for a repeat performance? You can't simply stop paying. We had an agreement. An agreement you shattered when you gave my house to Megan and Jason. Besides, you're nearly finished paying it off anyway. What remains? About $50,000. The silence on the other end made my stomach clench. It was the ominous silence that precedes devastating news. Mother. It's more than that. Her voice had suddenly shrunk, almost guilty. How much more? Another pause, longer and heavier. I could hear her breathing. Around $150,000. The world tilted sharply. My coffee mug slipped from my grasp, clattering against the counter without breaking. What? That's impossible. I've been paying extra on that mortgage for 4 years. I've contributed thousands beyond the required payments. There's no way. What did you do with the extra money I sent? My voice escalated to a shout echoing through the kitchen. What happened to it? The silence felt suffocating. Diane's next words froze my blood. Oh, we made the standard mortgage payments, she said with casual indifference. The extra money you sent. Well, we had necessary expenses. Expenses? I whispered incredulously. What expenses? Well, Warren and I needed a proper vacation after the stress of relocating. We toured the Caribbean for 2 weeks, stunning islands, gorgeous resorts. She actually sighed dreamily. Then there was Megan's designer wardrobe. You know how important appearances are in her social circles. And naturally, we updated several rooms in the house. I couldn't breathe. 4 years of extra payments, tens of thousands of dollars, squandered on luxury vacations and shopping sprees while I believed I was building equity. You stole from me, I managed through clenched teeth. You took my money for vacations. Don't be melodramatic, Avery. We're family. We simply redirected the funds where they were most needed. I ended the call and immediately texted back, the house belongs to Megan now. Ask her to pay the mortgage. Then I blocked their numbers, all of them. Diane, Warren, Megan. Done. Naturally, it wasn't that simple. 2 days later, they appeared at my door, pounding and shouting as if they still owned the property. Open this door immediately. Diane's voice was piercing. We need to discuss the mortgage payment. I stood firmly on the other side, motionless. There's nothing to discuss. I won't pay another penny. You must. Warren's voice now, aggressive and entitled. You're contractually responsible. Actually, I'm not, I replied calmly, feeling protected by the solid door between us. But I do possess bank statements documenting every payment I made. Text messages and emails about our house exchange. Evidence of potential fraud, according to my attorney. Silence fell heavily from the other side. If you continue this harassment, I added with newfound confidence, I'll pursue legal action. And believe me, my investment portfolio can sustain a lengthy, expensive court battle far better than your finances can. Care to test that theory? They departed shortly after, but not before hurling vicious profanities that echoed through the neighborhood. I waited until their car disappeared before exhaling deeply. A week later, my cousin Olivia called. Avery, thought you should know. Your parents are in financial trouble. They've exhausted their savings and even tapped their retirement accounts. And Megan, she had an explosive argument when they told her she needed to start paying the mortgage. She screamed that they promised her a free house, not financial responsibility. The neighbors heard the entire confrontation. I hung up and gazed at the garden where my grandmother's peonies bloomed brilliantly. She always said we harvest what we plant. I wondered what bitter crop my family would reap from their betrayal. 3 months after stopping the mortgage payments, I learned my parents had finally revealed their true nature to Megan too. My cousin Zoe called with the details. "You won't believe this," she said. "They actually brought police officers to evict Megan and Jason. They demanded she start paying the mortgage or vacate. When she refused, they arrived with law enforcement and formal eviction papers. Witnesses say Megan was hysterical about broken promises while packing their belongings. This was merely the beginning. Reports filtered in from various family members, each adding new dimensions to the situation. Aunt Jennifer mentioned they were desperately seeking loans. Uncle Thomas revealed their refinancing application had been rejected. Cousin Daniel noted they were investigating reverse mortgages. Then came the revelation that truly illuminated everything. Aunt Patricia, Diane's sister and notorious family gossip, possessed the complete story. "Did you know about their secret debts?" she whispered conspiratorially. "They secured personal loans for Megan's luxury SUV. And wait until you hear this, they borrowed extensively for her honeymoon. Paid for her and Jason's 2-week Maldives vacation at a private villa. They're completely drowning in debt." I contemplated this information, remembering all the months I'd scrimped on essentials to send extra mortgage payments. The final confirmation came from my friend Rachel, a manager at their bank. During our lunch, she leaned forward with concern. "I shouldn't disclose this," she confided, "but your parents received a final notice last week. They're 3 months delinquent now." I stirred my coffee thoughtfully. "They're facing foreclosure, aren't they?" She nodded grimly. "Without immediate payment, the bank will initiate proceedings." I knew their next move. They'd arrive tearfully at my door, apologizing profusely, begging for financial rescue. They'd make empty promises and false assurances. Diane would likely bring homemade pastries, just as she had when first proposing the house swap. But I was finished, done being their personal bank, done watching them prioritize Megan, done tolerating their manipulation. They'd made their choices: multiple loans, lavish expenditures, extravagant vacations. Now they could face the consequences independently. I stood by the bay window in my grandmother's cherished home, my home, watching the morning light filter through the mature oak trees she'd planted decades ago. The garden was coming alive with spring blooms, just as she had planned it. I ran my fingers along the solid wooden trim she'd lovingly maintained, feeling a profound connection to her wisdom. She hadn't left me this legacy so I could bankroll my family's irresponsible choices, but to provide me with security and stability. "They're facing complete financial ruin," Aunt Patricia warned during her last call. "Surely you're going to help them somehow?" I closed my eyes, memories flooding through me, 4 years of faithfully sending mortgage payments while they splurged on luxury vacations and designer wardrobes. The shock of being locked out of my own home. My precious belongings carelessly stuffed into garbage bags. My entitled sister lounging in the house I had financed and renovated with my hard-earned money. "No," I answered with quiet certainty. "I'm not." Sometimes the most difficult truth to accept is that you cannot rescue people determined to sink themselves. My family had orchestrated their own downfall, now they could experience the consequences. I had my own path to forge, my own dreams to pursue, my own future to build in this house that rightfully belonged to me. And this time, I wasn't surrendering an inch of what was mine.